Picture a Tuesday tea time in 1952. The coal range glowing, the smell of suet and onion drifting through the back room, and a plate landing on the oilcloth that, for one shining moment, made a docker's wife feel like she was hosting the gentry. That was the magic of the British poor man's table. Families with shillings to spare could still serve dishes that looked like a feast and tasted like celebration. We are counting down 25 forgotten British dinners that made poor families feel rich. From clever mocks of game and shellfish to puddings grand enough to feed 3 nights running. Which lost dinner crowned the working class table? Let us begin with number 25. Number 25. Mock duck stretched a few pennies of sausage meat into a Sunday centerpiece that fooled even the proudest fathers. Housewives mixed pork sausage meat with sage, onion, and breadcrumb stuffing, then shaped the mixture into a plump oval roast, scoring the top to mimic crispy duck skin. By 1953, a pound of sausage meat cost just 1 shilling and 4 pence, while a real duck ran nearly 7 shillings. The trick was in the presentation. Set on a willow pattern platter with applesauce, roast potatoes, and a green border of cabbage, mock duck looked every bit as grand as the genuine bird. Oral histories from Birmingham terraces recall the gasps when mother carved the first slice, the savory steam rising, the sage scenting the room, and children whispering whether it really was duck. For one Sunday in the month, the family ate like they had Sunday money. Number 24. Pan Haggerty turned 3 of the cheapest ingredients in the larder into a supper that felt like a feast on a cold Northumberland night. Housewives sliced potatoes and onions paper thin, layered them with grated cheddar in a heavy iron skillet, and cooked the lot slow over the range until the bottom turned dark gold and the cheese melted into stretching ribbons. The dish cost barely 6pence to feed a family of 5 in 1955. Yet the moment that crust hit the plate, it felt like something from a chop house. The smell of frying onion and bubbling cheese filled the back kitchen, and children fought for the corner with the deepest crust. Oral histories from Tyneside speak of Pan Haggerty as the dish that made Wednesday feel like Saturday, its richness disguising how little had actually been spent. Pride conjured from a skillet. Number 23. Beef olives let a single quarter pound of cheap stewing beef play the part of a banquet dish. Butchers sold thin slices of skirt or topside for 1 shilling and 2 pence a pound in 1954, and housewives beat them out flat with a rolling pin before spreading on a forcemeat of breadcrumbs, sweet, onion, and parsley. Rolled tight, tied with kitchen string, and braised in onion gravy for 2 hours, the little parcels emerged glossy and rich, sliced to reveal a green-flecked stuffing within. The name itself carried Edwardian glamour, a phrase lifted straight from Mrs. Beeton's pages and pronounced with quiet pride at the table. Children watched the strings being cut at the plate, the parcels unrolling steam, and felt sure their mother had cooked something the king himself might eat. A penny of beef, a shilling's worth of ceremony. Number 22. Stuffed marrow crowned the late summer table. When allotments groaned with vegetables nobody knew quite what to do with, housewives split a great green marrow lengthways, scooped out the seeds, and filled the hollow with minced mutton, tomatoes, and crumbs bound with a beaten egg. Baked for an hour beneath a coverlet of grated cheese and breadcrumbs, the marrow emerged steaming on a willow platter that filled the entire center of the table. By 1958, a marrow from the allotment cost nothing at all, and a few ounces of mince stretched to feed 7 without complaint. The dish looked enormous, almost ceremonial, sliced into thick portions like a green jacketed roast. Children remembered the silver knife sinking through the soft flesh, the savory steam, and the conviction that something splendid was happening. Stuffed marrow made allotment surplus into something that looked like Sunday. Number 21. The Bedfordshire clanger packed a whole 2-course meal into a single suet pastry roll. A trick that made one working man feel he had been served a banquet on the road. Housewives rolled out a long sheet of suet pastry, placed savory minced pork and potato at one end, and stewed apple or jam at the other, then sealed the whole into a long bolster shape and boiled it wrapped in a cloth for 2 hours. The clanger cost a few pence to make and travelled in a labourer's tin to the brickworks or harvest field. 2 meals, dinner and pudding, in one warm bundle. The boundary between savoury and sweet was sometimes marked with a strip of pastry, sometimes by faith alone. Field workers in Bedfordshire spoke of opening the cloth at noon, the steam rising, and feeling for a moment they had eaten properly twice over. Number 20. Brown Windsor soup carried a name so grand it lifted a humble bowl of stock into something almost regal. Housewives simmered beef bones, browned onions, and a knuckle of mutton for hours, finishing the broth with a slug of Madeira or sherry kept on the sideboard for visitors. By 1955, a soup like this could be conjured from butcher's offcuts, costing less than 9p. Yet poured from a tureen and served with a silver ladle, it carried echoes of the Queen's table, where the dish had once supposedly been a favourite. Oral histories from London boarding houses recall landladies serving brown Windsor as the first course of a Sunday tea, the deep mahogany broth gleaming in white china. Whether the royal connection was real or invented mattered little. The name alone, repeated at the table, made tenants feel they had stepped above their station for the evening. Number 19. Cottage pie turned Sunday's cold roast leftovers into Tuesday's centerpiece, a dish that arrived at the table looking like a deliberate creation rather than thrift. Housewives minced the cold beef through a hand grinder, browned it with onion and a spoonful of flour, then spread the mixture into a deep earthenware dish and crowned it with a thick blanket of mashed potato, scored with a fork into ridges that crisped golden in the oven. By 1954, a pound of leftover beef stretched to feed 6 this way, with a knob of butter and a splash of milk bringing the potato into a pale cloud. The pie emerged bubbling at the edges, the smell of beef gravy and crisped potato filling the back room. Children remembered the first cut, the gravy welling up beneath the potato roof, and the certainty that Mother had conjured something far grander than yesterday's joint. Number 18. Mock crab spread on toast brought a taste of the seaside hotel to inland kitchens that had never seen a shellfish. Housewives mashed cheddar cheese with a beaten egg, a spoon of vinegar, a pinch of mustard powder, and a touch of anchovy essence, warming the mixture gently until it thickened into a pale orange paste that resembled dressed crab almost too well. By 1956, a real crab cost 2 shillings and was unobtainable away from the coast, but mock crab needed only 1 ounce of cheese and a corner of the egg ration. Spread thick on hot buttered toast for Sunday tea, it was sliced into dainty fingers, garnished with watercress, and passed round as if it had come from a Cromer dressing room. Number 17. Faggots and peas dressed up the cheapest cuts the butcher had into something that looked like proper meatballs in glossy gravy. Black country housewives bought pig's liver, heart, and belly for a few pence a pound, minced the lot with onion and sage, then wrapped each portion in caul fat and baked them in trays of rich onion gravy until the tops crisped. By 1957, 4 faggots fed a family for 8 pence, served on a mountain of mushy peas with a splash of vinegar. Oral histories speak of children believing for years that they had eaten crab, only learning the truth as grown adults at a wedding. Number 16. Welsh rarebit elevated a slice of stale bread and a corner of cheese into the sort of supper served in gentlemen's clubs. The caul wrapping gave each one the shape and shine of a butcher's display piece, far more dignified than a pile of mints. Children carried plates back to the table proudly, watching the gravy pool around the peas, and felt sure that whatever was hidden inside, it must be something fine. Faggots made offal feel like Sunday dinner on a Tuesday night. Housewives melted strong cheddar in a heavy pan with a knob of butter, a spoon of flour, a slosh of brown ale, and a sharp dash of Worcestershire sauce, stirring until the mixture turned into a glossy, savory custard. Poured over toasted bread and finished under the grill until the top blistered dark gold, the dish appeared on tea tables across Wales and the West for less than 4p a portion in 1953. The ale gave it depth, the mustard a bite, and the brown grill bubbles a touch of theatre. Children remembered the smell of melted cheese and warm ale drifting from the range, and the moment of cutting through that glossy crust to find the soft toast beneath. Bread and cheese, dressed for company. Number 15. Deviled kidneys on toast brought a flash of Edwardian glamour to terraced kitchens that had never seen a butler. Housewives bought lamb kidneys from the butcher for less than 4p each, halved and trimmed them, then tossed the lot in a hot pan with butter, mustard powder, cayenne, Worcestershire sauce, and a splash of cream from the top of the milk. In 10 minutes, the kidneys turned mahogany dark, the sauce reduced to a glossy slick, and the whole was tipped over hot buttered toast. By 1954, deviled kidneys cost 9p to feed 3, yet the dish carried the air of a country house breakfast lifted straight from a P.G. Wodehouse novel. Oral histories speak of fathers eating with quiet pleasure, of the sharp, peppery steam, and of children allowed a small portion as a treat. Cheap offal, dressed in cayenne and ceremony. Number 14. Liver and bacon with onion gravy brought weeknight tea to a height of richness that disguised how little had been spent. Housewives bought a quarter pound of pig's liver for 4p in 1955, dusted the slices in seasoned flour, and fried them fast in bacon fat alongside rashers of streaky bacon, removing the lot before slowly cooking onions in the pan juices until they melted into a deep brown gravy. Served on a wide platter over mashed potato, with bacon arranged across the liver and onion. Gravy poured generously over all, the dish looked like something from the dining room of a small hotel. The smell of frying liver and bacon drifted through terrace streets at 6 o'clock, and children remembered the deep, savory richness of the gravy soaking into the mash. A coin's worth of liver, transformed by presentation into a feast. Number 13. Toad in the hole dressed for company with sage stuffing and a tureen of onion gravy transformed Tuesday's sausages into something that looked like a banquet centerpiece. Housewives whisked a Yorkshire pudding batter the night before to let it rest, poured it sizzling around a row of butcher's sausages and clumps of sage stuffing, and baked the lot until the batter rose into dark, golden cliffs around the meat. By 1958, 6 sausages and a pint of batter fed 7 for under 1 shilling and 6p. The dish arrived on the table puffed almost 2 inches above the tin, the smell of sage and sizzling fat filling the back room. Children stared at the towering golden crust. Parents poured thick onion gravy from a willow-pattern jug, and for that moment, it looked as if money had no object. Number 12. Smoked haddock with a poached egg brought the air of a country hotel breakfast room down to the family supper. Housewives bought a fillet of pale yellow smoked haddock from the fishmonger for 9p a pound in 1956, poached it gently in a wide pan of milk and butter until the flesh flaked at a fork, then served it on a warm plate with a poached egg trembling on top and a sprinkle of black pepper. The milk turned into a pale golden sauce that ran across the plate, and a wedge of brown bread caught every drop. The dish required almost no skill. But the color alone, the buttery yellow flesh, the cream of the egg, the dark pepper, looked like something served on white linen. Children remembered the smoky sweetness, the bright yolk breaking. 3 ingredients made into hotel fare. Number 11, the Forfar bridie carried Angus pride from butcher's window to family table with a richness that belied its few pence cost. Housewives or village bakers filled half circles of stiff, short pastry with chopped rump steak, a sprinkle of suet, finely diced onion, and nothing more, sealed the edges with a fluted crimp, and baked them until the pastry turned deep gold. By 1955, a bridie cost 4 pence at the bakehouse in Forfar, the size of a hand and weighing like a stone. The hot filling steamed when first cut, the simple seasoning letting the meat speak for itself, the pastry crisp enough to shatter. Oral histories from Angus recall families queuing at the bakehouse on a Friday afternoon, the smell of pastry drifting down the high street, and the conviction that no Cornish pasty could ever match the proper Scottish bridie. Number 10. Eel pie and mash with parsley liquor crowned the East End supper table with the look of something served in a chop house, but the price of an honest day's wages. Pie and mash shops dotted the streets of Whitechapel and Walworth by 1955, with a meat pie, a scoop of mash, and a ladle of bright green parsley liquor costing just 7 pence. The pies came in heavy white china, the mash flicked into a teardrop with a knife, and the liquor pooled around it in vivid green. Stewed eels in jelly waited in trays at the counter for those who wanted them. Marbled tables, sawdust floors, and porcelain-tiled walls gave the shops the air of grand institutions. Oral histories from Bermondsey recall families dressing properly for a Friday pie supper, the dish carrying more dignity than its few pence cost would ever suggest. Number 9. Mock goose turned a few potatoes and a couple of apples into something children genuinely believed had once flown. Housewives sliced potatoes thinly, layered them with sliced apples and onions in a deep dish, added a sprinkle of sage and a knob of dripping, then baked the whole until the top turned crisp and the apples melted into the potato in a sweet and savory cushion. By 1953, the dish cost less than 3 pence to make, yet served with a thick onion gravy and a spoon of red currant jelly on the side, it looked every bit like a Christmas centerpiece. The Ministry of Food had promoted mock goose during rationing, but housewives kept the recipe long after rationing ended, because the result felt almost ceremonial. Children remembered the sharp tang of apple cutting through the potato, the sage scenting the kitchen, and the conviction that goose must taste much like this. Number 8. Hashed mutton turned Monday's cold Sunday joint into a Tuesday tea that looked entirely new. Housewives sliced the leftover meat thin, laid it in a shallow dish, and covered it with a rich brown gravy made from the bones, sharpened with capers, vinegar, and a spoon of red currant jelly. Topped with triangles of fried bread arranged like sun rays around the rim, the dish carried the air of a coaching inn dinner. By 1956, hashed mutton stretched a 1 and 6 joint into 3 full meals. Yet the presentation, the brown gravy gleaming, the bread triangles glossy with dripping, made it look as though entirely fresh meat had been cooked. Children spooned up the dark sauce with the bread, never suspecting they were eating the same lamb they had seen on Sunday. Sharp, glossy, dignified. Yesterday's mutton dressed for company. Number 7, boiled beef and carrots crowned the music hall song and the working class Sunday table alike, a dish whose name alone carried the swagger of London pride. Housewives bought a piece of salt brisket for 1 shilling and 9 pence in 1954, simmered it for hours with carrots, onions, and a bunch of dumplings, then carved the meat in glistening slabs and surrounded it with bright orange roots and pale dumplings on a willow platter. The cooking liquor, ladled into bowls as a first course, was a meal in itself. Oral histories from Hackney and Bermondsey recall the song being whistled from the scullery as the joint simmered, the family feeling for one Sunday afternoon as though they had everything they wanted. Brisket was the cheapest cut on the butcher's slab, yet the presentation, the song, and the steam made it feel like the finest beef in the land. Number 6. Mock turtle soup carried perhaps the grandest name in the British poor man's repertoire, a dish lifted straight from the pages of Alice in Wonderland and served from terraced kitchens that had never seen a turtle. Housewives simmered a calf's head with herbs and lemon for hours, fortified the broth with sherry and Madeira, and finished with tiny forcemeat balls and a sliced hard-boiled egg floating in each plate. By 1956, a calf's head cost 1 shilling and 6pence at the butcher's, enough to feed 8, yet the name alone carried Victorian glamour and Lewis Carroll's fame. Served from a covered tureen with a silver ladle, the soup gleamed deep amber under the kitchen lights. Oral histories from South London speak of the dish being served when the vicar called, the name pronounced with quiet ceremony, and the entire family eating as if they were entertaining royalty. Number 5. The hand-raised pork pie with its hot water crust stood as the working man's answer to terrines from the finest delicatessens. Housewives or village butchers shaped boiling hot lard pastry around a wooden dolly, packed the cylinder with seasoned chopped pork shoulder, sealed the top with a thick pastry lid, and baked until the crust turned dark gold and crackling. After cooling, hot jellied stock was poured through a hole in the top to fill the gap between meat and crust. By 1955, a Melton Mowbray-style pie cost 1 shilling and 6pence, yet a single one carved into thick wedges with pickled onions and a fresh loaf made a tea for 6 that felt grand enough for a christening. Children remembered the spring of the jelly against the meat, the crunch of the crust, the certainty that this was the food of farmers who owned land. Number 4. Galantine of beef turned a pound of cheap mince into a pressed dish that could grace a buffet sideboard with the dignity of cold cuts from a proper game larder. Housewives mixed minced beef with sausage meat, beaten egg, chopped onion, and a handful of breadcrumbs, then packed the mixture into a basin lined with strips of streaky bacon and steamed for 3 hours. Pressed under a plate weighted with a flat iron overnight, the galantine emerged firm enough to slice cleanly. Served cold on a willow plate with a jelly glaze and a garnish of parsley, it carried the air of a French chateau supper for less than 1 shilling and 9pence in 1956. Oral histories from Surrey and the home counties recall galantines arriving at church fetes and christenings, sliced into elegant rounds that looked as though the family kept a cook. Number 3. Steak and kidney pudding stood as the dish that most reliably transformed a few pence of cheap stewing meat into a Sunday centerpiece of unmistakable grandeur. Housewives lined a pudding basin with suet pastry, filled it with chunks of skirt beef and ox kidney bound in seasoned flour, sealed the lid with a knot of pastry, and steamed it on the range for 4 full hours. By 1954, the filling cost 1 shilling and 8pence, yet the moment the cloth was untied, the basin inverted onto a willow plate, and the lid cut to release a gush of mahogany gravy. The entire kitchen fell silent. Children remembered the suet crust, glossy with steam, the dark gravy welling up through the cut, and the certainty that they had been served the king of all suppers. Few dishes have ever delivered such richness for such a small price. Number 2. The Sunday roast made from a cheap cut anchored the entire week of the British poor and made every family, for one afternoon, feel they had arrived. Housewives bought a piece of brisket, silver side, or scrag end of mutton for 2 shillings a pound in 1954, roasted it slow in a tin of dripping with potatoes and parsnips packed around, and brought it to the table with Yorkshire puddings, 2 vegetables, and a boat of gravy thickened with the pan juices. Yet for that 1 hour on Sunday afternoon, the table held a centerpiece grand enough to silence the room. The smell of roasting meat drifted into the street, neighbors nodded knowingly, and children remembered the carving as the most dignified moment of their week. Cheap meat served as ceremony. And finally, in first place, the raised game pie crowned the British poor man's table with a dish so grand in name and appearance that no one would ever guess its ingredients had been gathered from hedgerows and back gardens at no cost at all. Housewives or country butchers built a tall hot water crust around a wooden form, packed the inside with a mixture of rabbit, pigeon, and sometimes a bit of pork shoulder for fat, sealed the lid with a decorated pastry rose, and baked the pie until the crust turned dark mahogany. After cooling, jellied stock was poured through the steam hole, setting the contents into a sliceable masterpiece. By 1955, the ingredients cost less than 2 shillings if the rabbits were snared and the pigeons were shot on a Sunday afternoon. Yet, sliced onto a platter at Christmas or a christening, the game pie carried the unmistakable air of a country estate, the pastry glossy, the meat dark and rich in its amber jelly. Oral histories from Norfolk and the West Country recall the pie being treated almost reverently at the table, sliced thin so it would last, served with chutneys and pickled walnuts kept in stoneware jars on the cold pantry shelf. Children remembered the deep, savory richness, the spring of jelly against the meat, and the certainty that whatever the family lacked the rest of the year, on this day they had eaten as well as any lord in the county. Of all the dinners the British poor ever set upon their tables, none ever did more to make a family feel rich than a proper raised game pie carved at Christmas. Across all 25 entries, from the humble mock duck that opened our list to the triumphant raised game pie at the very top, these forgotten British dinners tell a powerful story of pride, presentation, and the quiet genius of the working-class kitchen. Some leaned on theatre, others on clever names, but every one of them turned a few shillings into a moment of plenty. These were not just meals. They were small acts of dignity, served from terraced kitchens, to families who refused to let hard times feel like hard times. The smell of suet, sage, and dripping may have faded from British back rooms, but the memory of feeling rich for one Sunday afternoon will last as long as the stories are told.